Ladies and gentlemen, do you ever notice how some people drain the life out of every room they walk into? Now imagine being married to that person. A narcissistic husband doesn't just argue, he rewrites reality, makes you question your sanity, and convinces you that your needs don't matter. Today, we're going to break down exactly how that plays out, so you can spot to the signs and protect yourself from getting stuck in that cycle. You know what's tricky about a narcissistic husband? It's not the monster you picture in your head. It's not someone storming through the house yelling, throwing things, or making it obvious that he's a problem. It's the opposite. It's someone who looks like the perfect partner when other people are watching. He's funny. He's attentive. He remembers your friends' names, holds the door, brags about how amazing his wife is, and people see that and think, wow, you've got it good. But here's the thing. What you see in public and what his wife sees at home are two totally different realities. When it's just the two of them, the charm has an expiration date. And the second that door closes, the focus shifts from building her up to making sure she's under control. That control doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes in small, quiet corrections. A little jab about how she said something the wrong way at dinner. A smirk when she shares her opinion, followed by you really think that's true. It seems harmless at first, but it's not, because those little digs, they add up. They create a world where she starts second-guessing herself in private, while in public, everyone else still sees him as this great charismatic guy. That's part of the power play. He knows that the better he looks out there, the harder it is for her to convince anyone of what's actually happening at home. And so the mask isn't just for strangers, it's part of the control. She feels trapped between the version of him the world adores and the version of him that she has to tiptoe around. And that's exhausting. Imagine knowing that if you say something to a friend, they'll look at you like you're overreacting because all they've ever seen is his charm. That isolation isn't an accident. It's part of the design. Now here's where it gets even more complicated. He'll sprinkle just enough of that public charm into private moments to keep her hooked. He'll surprise her with flowers after days of criticism. He'll plan a date night after weeks of coldness. And in those moments, she gets a glimpse of the man everyone else sees. It gives her hope. She starts thinking, maybe he really is that guy. Maybe I'm the one who's too sensitive. But those glimpses are temporary. They're bait. They keep her in the cycle because she's chasing a version of him that only shows up when it benefits him. The control is subtle, but it's effective. Instead of shouting demands, he sets the stage so that her choices feel smaller and smaller. He decides what's appropriate for her to say. He critiques how she spends her time. He gives just enough approval to make her crave it and just enough disapproval to keep her doubting herself. And the scariest part is that to the outside world, none of this exists. They see a man who smiles, shakes hands, talks about how much he loves his wife. They never see the conversations in the car afterward, where he tells her everything she did wrong. They don't hear the sighs, the subtle sarcasm, the slow erosion of her confidence. That's why it's so damaging. Because when the abuse is private, the charm is public, it leaves her stranded in between. She starts to question her own reality. If everyone else sees him as this great husband, then maybe the problem really is me. And once that thought takes root, it makes leaving feel almost impossible. Because how do you walk away from someone the rest of the world praises? How do you explain to people that the person they admire is the same one tearing you down behind closed doors? The truth is, that's how a narcissistic husband operates. He creates two versions of himself, one for the crowd, polished and likable, and one for his wife, sharp and controlling. And the painful reality is the wife lives in the second version every day, while the world never sees it. That's why this first point matters. Because if you only judge the relationship by the charm you see in public, you'll miss the control happening in private. And that gap, that distance between appearance and reality, is exactly where a narcissistic husband thrives. Here's the thing about criticism from a narcissistic husband. It rarely shows up as something blunt and obvious. It doesn't sound like you're awful or you're worthless. If it did, it would be easier to spot, easier to defend against. Instead, it slips in dressed up as something helpful, something constructive, even something loving. He'll say it in a tone that makes it sound like he's guiding her, like he's protecting her, like he's trying to make her better, but underneath that disguise, what he's really doing is cutting her down piece by piece until she starts to believe she can't stand on her own without his input. It often starts small. Maybe she's getting ready to go out excited about how she looks, and he'll tilt his head, smile just a little, and say, "That dress is fine, but I think the other one looks better on you." Now, on the surface, that sounds like a compliment. He's offering advice, right? He's helping her look her best, but the message underneath is that her choice isn't good enough, that she can't trust her own judgment. And when that pattern repeats over her clothes, over her cooking, over the way she tells a story to friends, she starts second-guessing herself before she even opens her mouth. The criticism is rarely about the thing itself. It's not about the dress or the story or the dinner. It's about control. Because every time he plants the seed that she's wrong and he's right, he gains just a little more ground in making sure she relies on him. And here's the kicker. If she pushes back, if she dares to say, "That hurts," or "Why do you always correct me?" he'll flip it. He'll laugh, roll his eyes, and say something like, "I was just trying to help. You're too sensitive." Suddenly, she's not only wrong in her choices, she's wrong in her reactions, too. This is where the damage multiplies, because now it's not just about the criticism itself, it's about the way he invalidates her feelings about it. She starts questioning not only what she does, but how she feels. And over time, that's exhausting. Imagine never being able to trust your own instincts without wondering how he's going to spin it. That's not partnership. That's a slow erosion of confidence, and it's deliberate. What makes it even harder is the delivery. He can lace that criticism with a smile, with a soft tone, even with affection. He'll say, "I just want the best for you," or "I'm only pointing this out because I love you." And to anyone else listening, it sounds like care. But to her, it feels like another reminder that she's never quite enough unless it passes as approval. That's what makes it so isolating. From the outside, he looks like a husband who's deeply invested in his wife. On the inside, she's drowning under the weight of never measuring up. And here's the painful irony. Many women in this position actually start working harder to earn that approval. They think, if I just do this right, if I just meet his standard, then maybe he'll stop criticizing. But the bar is always moving, no matter how much effort she gives. No matter how much she bends to fit his expectations, he will always find a new way to point out where she's lacking. Because the point was never to help her grow. The point was to keep her dependent. That cycle creates an invisible cage. She's not locked in with threats or chains. She's locked in with words that make her feel small, words that convince her she needs him to be complete. And because those words are disguised as help, she often feels guilty for resenting them. She thinks maybe he's right, maybe he really is just trying to help me. That's how deep the manipulation runs. So when we talk about criticism in this kind of marriage, we can't mistake it for normal disagreements or healthy feedback. This isn't about two people sharpening each other, building each other up. This is about one person hiding control inside of kindness. And the longer it goes unchecked, the more it chips away at her ability to believe in herself. That's the cruel reality of it. His words aren't about helping her grow. They're about making sure she never feels like she can grow without him. Gaslighting is one of the most dangerous tools a narcissistic husband uses, because it doesn't just control the moment. It rewrites reality. It's not yelling. It's not even always obvious. It's subtle, calculated, and it works because it makes his wife question the one thing she should be able to trust, her own mind. When gaslighting shows up, it usually starts with small things. She remembers a conversation one way and he insists it happened differently. She recalls something he said that hurt her and he looks her in the eye and says, "I never said that." At first she might push back, confident in what she knows she heard or saw, but the more it happens, the more she starts to wonder if maybe she's misremembering. It gets paired with blame, shifting, and that's when the trap tightens. He does something wrong, loses his temper, breaks a promise, criticizes her in front of friends, and instead of owning it, he flips the script. Suddenly, she's the problem. He'll say she provoked him, or she's too sensitive, or she made him act that way. And what happens over time is she ends up carrying the responsibility for his behavior. She's apologizing for things she didn't cause, adjusting herself for mistakes she didn't make, trying to prevent explosions that were never her fault in the first place. The danger in gaslighting is that it erodes the foundation of self-trust. Imagine constantly being told that what you heard isn't what you heard, what you saw isn't what you saw, and what you felt isn't valid. After enough repetition, even the strongest person begins to lose confidence in their own perspective. And that's exactly the point. A narcissistic husband knows that if he can make her doubt herself, he doesn't have to argue as hard to win. She'll start handing over her reality without even realizing it. What makes it so devastating is the way it sneaks into everyday life. Let's say she brings up an issue calmly and respectfully. Maybe she says, "It really hurt me when you dismissed me in front of our friends." Instead of hearing her out, he'll tilt his head and reply, "That didn't happen. You're imagining things." And in that moment, she's stuck in a fog. She knows how she felt. She knows what happened. But he's so confident, so insistent, that she starts to hesitate. Maybe she misread it. Maybe she did overreact. That hesitation becomes self-doubt. And that self-doubt becomes silence. And that silence is what gives him more power. Now add blame. Shifting to the mix. Let's say he raises his voice, snaps at her for something small. She points out that it's hurtful, and instead of owning it, he says, "Well, if you hadn't annoyed me, I wouldn't have had to yell." Notice the pattern. It's never about his choices. It's always about her supposed flaw. That way, he never has to take accountability. And she's left carrying the weight of both his actions and her own. And if this happens enough, she begins to believe it's her job to keep the peace, her responsibility to avoid conflict, her fault when he lashes out. The most heartbreaking part is that she starts to live in two worlds. In one world, she knows deep down something is wrong. She feels the exhaustion, the confusion, the constant walking on eggshells. But in the other world, the one he's worked so hard to construct, she feels like maybe it's all her fault. And living between those two worlds is emotionally draining, because it's not just about dealing with him anymore. It's about trying to figure out if she can even trust herself. And here's why this matters so much. When someone loses trust in themselves, it makes leaving nearly impossible. If you don't believe your own memories, if you don't believe your own feelings, how do you stand up and say, "This is wrong"? Gaslighting isn't just about winning an argument. It's about breaking down the very compass that would allow her to find her way out. That's the cruel effectiveness of it. By twisting reality and shifting blame, he keeps her trapped in a cycle where she questions herself more than she questions him. Love in a healthy marriage is steady. It's something you can lean on even when things get hard. But with a narcissistic husband, love doesn't show up that way. It's conditional. It's not about being loved for who you are. It's about being loved for how well you meet his needs. And that's not really love at all. That's a transaction dressed up like affection. What makes it confusing is that he knows exactly when to give and when to withhold. When she's doing what he wants, he can be warm, affectionate, even overwhelming with praise. He'll tell her how lucky he is, how he couldn't live without her. He'll hug her, kiss her, put his arm around her in public. In those moments, it feels real. It feels like maybe this is the relationship she always hoped for. But the second she steps out of line, when she disagrees, when she asserts her own needs, when she doesn't give him the attention he thinks he deserves, that love disappears. Suddenly he's cold, dismissive, withholding, and the message is clear. Love isn't something she can count on. It's something she has to earn. That back and forth creates a roller coaster that keeps her hooked, because when he's warm, she feels a flood of relief. Finally, things are good again. And when he's cold, she scrambles to figure out what she did wrong so she can get back to the warmth. That cycle becomes addictive. It's like chasing a high that never lasts. She's not in a relationship built on stability. She's in a constant guessing game, trying to decode what will keep him happy enough to keep the love flowing. The truth is, he's not loving her. He's rewarding her. And there's a big difference. Rewards or based on performance. Love. Real love is based on presence, respect, and commitment. But he doesn't operate that way. His affection comes with strings attached. And those strings are always pulled in his direction. She doesn't feel cherished. She feels managed. Over time, that kind of conditional affection wears her down. She begins to measure her worth not by who she is, but by how well she keeps him pleased. If he's happy with her, she feels good. If he's not, she feels like a failure. And the worst part is the bar is never steady. He'll move it without warning. What worked yesterday won't work today. What earned praise in one moment burns criticism in the next. She's left in a constant state of uncertainty, always working, always striving, never allowed to just be. And that uncertainty, those highs and lows, are what keep her tethered. Because when the good moments come, they feel so good, they feel like proof that maybe things aren't as bad as they seem. She'll cling to those moments as evidence that the relationship is worth saving. But in reality, those good moments are manufactured. They're not genuine connection. They're control mechanisms. He knows that if he gives her just enough of the affection she craves, she'll stay invested, no matter how painful the lows get. This kind of love also teaches her something dangerous. It teaches her that her needs don't matter because every time she tries to express them, the affection is pulled away. Every time she stands her ground, he withholds the warmth. So she learns to suppress herself, to keep quiet, to go along, just to hold on to the slivers of connection he dews out. And the longer that goes on, the more she loses touch with her own voice, her own desires, her own identity. What looks from the outside like a marriage full of ups and downs is really a carefully constructed system of control. Conditional love is the hook that keeps her from walking away. It convinces her that if she just tries harder, if she just bends a little more, she can get back to the good version of him. But the truth is that version of him isn't stable. It's not sustainable. And it's not love, because real love doesn't vanish when you disagree. Real love doesn't punish you for speaking up. Real love doesn't come with conditions. One of the quietest but most devastating tactics a narcissistic husband uses: isolation. It doesn't usually start with something obvious, like "I don't want you seeing your friends anymore." It begins in subtle ways, so subtle that she might not even notice it happening. Until one day she looks around and realizes her circle has gotten smaller and smaller, and the only voice she hears is his. That's not an accident. That's design. At first it might sound like care. Maybe she tells him she's going out with a friend and he says, "Are you sure? She doesn't seem like a good influence on you." Or she wants to visit family and he sighs and says, "They don't really respect me, do they? Why would we spend time with people who don't support our marriage?" On the surface it sounds protective, even loving. But underneath, it's about planting doubt. Doubt about the people she trusts. Doubt about the relationships that give her perspective outside of him. Every little seed of doubt makes her question whether it's worth the friction to stay connected. And little by little, she pulls away from people she once leaned on. Then comes the guilt. If she does choose to see friends or family, he punishes her in quiet ways. Maybe he sulks the entire time she's gone. Maybe he makes passive-aggressive comments when she comes back. "Must be nice to have all that free time while I'm here alone." Or he picks a fight right before she leaves so that she spends the whole outing distracted, feeling like she abandoned him. After enough of those experiences, she starts making choices not based on what she wants, but on what will keep the peace at home. She avoids dinners, avoids calls, avoids anything that might lead to the cold shoulder or the silent treatment later. And again, the circle gets smaller. The result of this isolation is dependency. When the voices of friends and family fade, his becomes the loudest, sometimes the only one. And if his voice is the only one she hears, then his version of reality starts to feel like the truth. If he says she's overreacting, she believes it. If he says she's lucky to have him, she clings to it. If he says no one else would put up with her, it starts to sound believable. Without outside perspective, it's incredibly difficult to see the manipulation for what it is. But isolation alone isn't enough, because even if he cuts off her connections, she still has her own emotional needs. She still longs for comfort, for affection, for reassurance. That's where the second half of this pattern comes in. Emotional starvation. A narcissistic husband knows exactly how to withhold what she needs most. He knows how to go days without giving affection, how to ignore her feelings when she's vulnerable, how to shut down conversation when she reaches out, and because he's already trained her to see his love as conditional, she believes it's on her to earn it back. Picture this. She comes to him upset, needing comfort. Instead of support, he criticizes her for being dramatic. Or she reaches for his hand and he pulls away, saying he's tired. Or she tries to share a fear and he dismisses it with a joke. Each rejection feels small on its own, but stacked together, it creates a constant hunger for connection that never gets satisfied. That hunger is powerful because it keeps her chasing after scraps of affection. And then just when she's about to give up hope, he'll throw her a bone. He'll wrap his arm around her on the couch, or say something sweet before bed, or support her with kindness. And those little gestures feel enormous because of how starved she is. They light her up with relief, with gratitude, with hope. She thinks, there he is. That's the man I fell in love with. But what she doesn't realize is that he knows exactly what he's doing. By keeping her deprived and then sprinkling in rare moments of affection, he ensures she stays hooked. It's the same cycle of conditional love, but on a deeper, more damaging level, because now it's not to access about approval. It's about her survival for emotional connection. This combination of isolation and starvation creates a prison without walls. From the outside, she can technically walk away anytime she wants, but inside, she feels trapped. She's cut off from the support system that would remind her she deserves better. And she's emotionally depleted from constantly chasing love that never comes consistently. That's why so many women in this situation stay longer than anyone on the outside can understand. It's not weakness. It's not ignorance. It's conditioning. It's being worn down day after day until leaving feels harder than staying. And then here's the heartbreaking truth. The longer she stays, the more she forgets what real connection feels like. She forgets what it's like to laugh freely with friends, to feel comfort without strings attached, to be loved without conditions. When isolation and starvation take root, they don't just control hurt, they reshape her sense of what's normal. And once someone believes that emotional scraps are all they deserve, it becomes almost impossible to imagine something different. But that's the reality of life with a narcissistic husband. It's not just the words he says, it's the silence he forces. It's not just the people he criticizes, it's the people she loses. It's not just the love he withholds, it's the way he teaches her to believe she has to fight for every drop of it. And that's why this point matters so much. Because when love becomes a hunger and connection becomes a cage, she's not just living in a marriage, she's surviving in captivity. Here's a conclusion that ties all 5 points together, keeps the tone steady, and lands with impact. When you step back and look at the pattern, it's clear. The charm in public, the constant criticism, the gaslighting, the conditional love, the isolation, and emotional starvation. None of it is random. It's all part of a cycle designed to keep control. And when you're inside it, it feels confusing, exhausting, and impossible to explain. Because to everyone else, he still looks like the perfect husband. But the truth is, real love doesn't confuse you. Real love doesn't make you doubt your memory, your worth, or your sanity. Real love doesn't shrink your world down until the only voice you hear is someone else's. A narcissistic husband will treat his wife like a possession to manage, not a partner to cherish. And that's why recognizing these patterns matters, because the moment you can name what's happening, the fog begins to lift. And when the fog lifts, so does the lie that this is the best you can get, or the best you deserve. Because the truth is, you deserve more. You deserve